Well, let's take you at your face and say you're young, you didn't follow politics until right up to the point where Trump was sworn in this time. Okay.
Act like that's unreasonable and reframe it like you didn't pay attention to politics until Donald Trump was sworn in right at 2024. It's like, okay, dude, come on. And we know this is just poisoning the well. That's all it is. Because Rob doesn't know me, all right? He doesn't know any of my political things. He knows that I can't really like expound upon it on Sarah's panel the whole time. It's just poisoning the well. It's just making me look unreasonable, even though I've shown absolutely no bad faith throughout this entire debate. Okay. I feel like it starting. If we're super concerned about corruption, I think viewing it as like doing it
to open it up.
Okay. So, as is not uncommon news, the other night I was able to debate Rob Noerr, quote unquote debate, because it was a pretty I don't know, not super confrontational conversation. I was mostly coming in to address his double standard, which I think I adequately pointed out, and we'll go over some of the things. One of the things that did frustrate me that I couldn't really point out, because something to keep in mind as well is I'm trying to be like super respectful of Sarah's format, so I'm not trying to like jump down his throat on a bunch of stuff. But it seems like Rob's strategy for this was just well poisoning right at the very beginning, which is like, yeah, you know, the Democrats are going to say this, this, and this, and then just presupposing that that's unreasonable. We'll get into more specific details, but that's the main thing that I don't think I addressed super well, is that there was a lot of well poisoning that I didn't actually address, that I didn't actually get the chance to fight back against. I get his point of only worrying about one side if that side is doing a lot of bad double standard corruption, but I'm unconvinced that the Republican Party is the party to fight corruption. That's partially true, but I reject the idea that it's corruption coming from one side. What we've seen time and time again is that whenever a party comes into power, it's obviously like it's going to be motivated to curtail the power of the other party, and they engage in some they engage in some corruption. That's obviously going to be true of the Democrats, but that's obviously going to be true of the Republicans. And if you are trying to fight against corruption, why are we acting like the Republican Party is the one to corral around when they're engaging in the same exact kinds of corruption that you're calling out? If you want to say, yeah, we should fight against one-sided corruption, that's fine, but it's not one-sided. And to act like it's one-sided and just coming from the Democrats is meaning that we're not adequately addressing corruption.
Rinyald, you've been so patient and quiet, and I appreciate it.
Seems like yours went better than mine. Yeah. You got kicked for the typing, didn't you?
Sound as well, cleaner, but I did want to start with Rinyald because he's been here since the get-go.
Thank you. I don't like interrupting. Okay. So, nice to meet you, Rob. All right. Jesus Christ. So I think that we could probably agree on certain instances of corruption within the Democratic Party. I think personally that the person who deleted the subpoenaed evidence on behalf of, well, not directly on behalf of Clinton, but like in the Clinton campaign should have been charged. I think that's fine. There's definitely things that you can point to. I don't know a whole ton about the Burisma corruption thing, whether or not he should have been impeached for that or not. I think it's fine that they opened the impeachment inquiry. I think that was fine. But one of my problems that came up was with the soy pill thing, not on behalf of soy pill, but just in that controversy. I feel like if we're super concerned about corruption, I think viewing it as like through a party lens is just not going to be a good way to fight corruption. Like if we have somebody like literally coming out and saying like, hey, yeah, thee who saves his country cannot violate any law, or that him like coming out and saying like, yeah, if you work with these law firms, we're gonna revoke your government grant. I will say something else is that later on I ended up getting really, really bogged down in specific details. I didn't really hit at this point accurately until right at the very end, where it's like, we can agree that there might be corruption and there might be a double standard in charging when it comes to specific agents within the FBI. That's fine. why are we backing an already established, also corrupt party to fight corruption? It feels like we're just trying to, and this is the Trump strategy as well. We're not draining the swamp. We're replacing the swamp with our swamp. That's the problem that I kind of came across with this debate. I feel like shouldn't we be fighting against that corruption just as hard, no matter if it's the Republican Party doing it or if like the people who are alongside us fighting it are people who are, you know, inconsistent in their ideology?
In general, I'll say yes, but on the specifics, I don't think you're correct about either of those situations. For example, the Napoleon quote, one, this is just Trump's words. We've heard other people say similar things in the past. Second, objectively, that statement is probably accurate, and I could probably get you to agree with it, right? There are times, for example, if you are someone who exists in the time of slavery and you're a politician in this country, clearly slavery is the rule of the land, and yet would you say then that it would be unfair for those politicians that maybe decided that they were going to break into a place and free the slaves? You would say, how dare they suggest something like that? Clearly that's lawlessness. Would you say that?
I mean, it is going to be lawless, but it's not going to be immoral. But I would also say that the fact that Donald Trump was saying it, I'm pretty sure off the back of an injunction on the AEA deportations. I think that's what it was for, or one of the deportation things. I think the context of that, basically, you know, hinting at the fact that maybe we could ignore court orders, especially since, you know, Tom Homan said something very akin to that as well. I think the context here is super duper different.
No, it wouldn't be. For example, if a president wanted to ignore a court order that said that slavery was legitimate or black people couldn't vote or women couldn't vote.
This was, I think this part went well for me. The idea of breaking the law to free slaves and breaking the law to deport people without giving them the ability to challenge their deportation. Like these two levels of extremity are like way far apart, and like breaking the law breaking the law, like its morality is going to be contingent on the emergency that requires you to break the law here. Obviously we could say, okay, breaking the law to prevent slavery, that's something that we could say, okay, or to stop slavery. We could say that that's morally permissible. But breaking the law in order to deport a bunch of people without fulfilling their due process rights, like that's not something that we would say, okay, that's a moral breaking of the law. Obviously, it's the same thing as like it may be illegal actually, I don't know if I can think of an analogy clearer than that, if I'm being honest. This is just, there's clearly different circumstances that you can say, I'm above the law. You know, if you break the law to free slaves, you can say, okay, yeah, that was lawless, but that was good. You know, that's fine. But then if you say, thee who saves his country violates no law after robbing people of their due process rights, that feels way more predatory, way less justifiable. And removing the context of like causing Donald Trump to say that is just I don't even like. This is something that frustrates me with Rob too, is that Jesus Christ, the dude mowing the lawn is really loud. I don't know if it's picking up through stream. This is something that really frustrates me with Rob, and it's something that people criticize Destiny for, I think, where it's, and you'll see this here, we'll hop from topic to topic until you find one that you don't know as in depth, and then we'll just hyper focus on the topic that you don't know in depth. And that's why I think pretty soon he jumps off of this tweet, and that's why he didn't end up latching on to the law firm example that I gave, because later on he'll say, like, don't you see how like this double standard from the FBI is a little worse than a mean tweet? As if I only referenced a mean tweet, and as if I didn't reference directly Donald Trump removing government grants from people who work with law firms that he doesn't like Perkins Coie. The fact that that wasn't engaged with at all, and it was kind of brushed off, to then draw the comparison between the Napoleon tweet in isolation and this big conspiracy about not charging the person who deleted subpoenaed evidence for Hillary Clinton. It's just yeah, I don't know. I don't know technically if it's a straw man, but it's definitely like I think he knows what he's doing when he's drawing that specific comparison.
I'm assuming you would look at it differently.
But
the
that's
point I'm
not the
trying to make
situation we
is
were
the
in.
quote that
That's
Napoleon
what I was getting at when I said that's not the situation we're in. We're not in the situation where it's a moral obligation to free the slaves. We're in a situation where we're just getting rid of people with like a bad faith interpretation of a predatory incursion.
making, if you got to ask Napoleon, he would say, of course I'm not saying if the governing body says it's illegal, then it's illegal. I'm not saying no, it's not illegal. He's saying that there's a higher law. There's a higher authority, a moral authority. And so I answer to that higher authority. And if that...
And that's true. And obviously no one who's saying, like, the who saves his country violates no law. Obviously they're not saying, like, oh yeah, and I'm engaging in evil, and I know that I'm actually breaking the law, mwahaha. Like, obviously that's not going to be the intention. But when you're saying the who saves his country violates no law on the grounds of you know, ignoring a court order that's stopping you from deporting people without adhering to their due process rights, like, that's a way different in character thing than breaking the law to free the slaves. Now, I don't actually remember if the Napoleon tweet came off of the AEA deportations, but I'm pretty sure it did. So yeah, that context is, like, super separate. And to act like anything that Donald Trump would ignore a court order over would be akin to, like, the moral obligation to free slaves is just, not effective to me.
That means breaking the lower authority of the governments of this country, then I break no law because I answer to God's law or to the moral authority. Now, I actually didn't like the quote by Donald Trump, but the idea that this is something that we need to objectively push back against is nonsensical. And I guess my answer to you would be this. Yeah, I've criticized...
And notice also that, Rob, the reason that I said that we need to push back against it is because of the context in which he said it, and Rob isn't engaging with the context in which he said it, and he's just trying to hyper focus to the best possible interpretation of this tweet in circumstances that didn't exist.
A lot of things that this current Trump administration's done. I'm not interested in hearing from it for people that cheered on evidence of corruption in the previous administration. For example, you seem to be someone who's quite studious on politics, at least enough that you're talking about things recently. Did you push back against the fact that because Bannon and Navarro violated a subpoena that they were jailed? Did you push back as that was a political attack on people associated with Trump?
Also,
did you...
this is one of the things too. Is like, oh, I'll let it play through. Hold on.
Follow-up question. Did you push back on trying to disbar a bunch of Trump's lawyers and piercing attorney-client privilege to attempt to go after them? Did you push back on that?
So, I mean, in regard to the Bannon Navarro thing, I know you pointed this out in the beginning, but I only really started following. That was the poisoning of the well. He said at the beginning, like, oh yeah, these people are going to come in and say they weren't following politics at the time, so they couldn't condemn it, or they're going to condemn it post-mortem, but they're not going to condemn it while it's happening. Okay, well, I'm 21. This was my first election, so why would I condemn something that has no bearing on me at all? Like, I have no reason to come out and publicly condemn, like, the fucking arresting somebody for violation of a subpoena, like Bannon and Navarro, when I'm not politically engaged like that. Because I assume that happened, probably 2021, 2022? Like, I was still in high school. I was graduating high school. I had bigger things to do. And to act like, also, you can't make claims of corruption now with the current president if you don't call out this hyper niche thing like Bannon and Navarro getting arrested for a violated subpoena is, like, insanity. But I am glad that he brought up the disbarring lawyers, because it's a talking point that sounds really good if you don't know anything about it. But if you do know anything about it, like the lawyers being disbarred were like Jenna Ellis, Kenneth Chesborough, John Eastman, it becomes so much clearer and so much more justifiable to do it. But that's also part of the strategy, is just the you know, leaving out the context of certain things to, like, make it sound super, super bad and not go into any of the details unless absolutely necessary. For this election, because I just, you know, I'm 21. This was the first election that I could vote in. I'm sorry. So this is the first election I could vote in, so obviously I'm going to be paying more attention to this election than, you know, past elections. But as it comes to violating attorney-client privilege, if you're referring to, like, Eastman being disbarred, I think that that's probably fine. I don't know if it is a violation of attorney-client privilege. So I probably don't. And when I say that, he also doesn't push back on it at all. I say, well, I don't know if disbarring Eastman was a violation of attorney-client privilege, because there was literally a court case that ruled it wasn't a violation of attorney-client privilege, because you can't advocate for your client as an attorney to break the law. That's not something that you can do as an attorney. But then there was no pushback on that because, you know, I think he knows that I know what I'm talking about in this regard. Hi, Andreas. It's been a little bit. How's it going? Did you watch Charlie Kirk at Cambridge? I've seen clips, obviously, but I haven't watched the whole thing.
How about this? We do something different then. Let's take you at your face and say you're young. You didn't follow politics until right up to the point where Trump was sworn in this time. Okay, let's accept that first.
And what was the debate about? So Rob was doing a thing on the Raging Tomato, where it was like criticisms from the Democrats about Trump should be laughed at or something along the lines of that. And I came on to say like, hey, if we're actually concerned about corruption, we should probably be addressing corruption at every stage instead of just on the Democrat side, which I feel is pretty obvious. And that we should be standing hand in hand with the people who do want to fight corruption, even if they're not your political allies. I hated the reframing of this was my first election, so I'm going to pay more attention to Kamala Harris and Donald Trump instead of the entire fucking party of the DNC and how they interacted with the 2020 to 2016 elections. To act like that's unreasonable and reframe it like you didn't pay attention to politics until Donald Trump was sworn in right at 2024. It's like, okay, dude, come on. And we know this is just poisoning the well. That's all it is, because Rob doesn't know me, all right? He doesn't know any of my political things. He knows that I can't really like expound upon it on Sarah's panel the whole time. It's just poisoning the well. It's just making me look unreasonable, even though I've shown absolutely no bad faith throughout this entire debate.
Second,
not quite that, but yeah, sure.
Okay, so you said that it sounds like someone in Hillary Clinton's team that intentionally deleted subpoenaed evidence should have been charged. You stand by that?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, so would you say the fact that the FBI didn't charge them shows that there was a double standard by the FBI?
I don't know if it would show a double standard by the FBI, because I don't know if we can lump FBI agents to guilt the entire FBI, but I would say like, yeah, and that's something too that Rob does, is that one person acting corruptly within the FBI means the entire FBI is corrupt, or the entire FBI persecuting this person from a party means that the entire opposing party is corrupt. Like the FBI refusing to charge the guy from Clinton's campaign, I would say, yeah, that's bad. But I don't know if that shows corruption within the DNC even. Nor do I think it shows corruption within the entire FBI. And I think that phrasing it like that is super reductive. There's a double standard there.
Okay, do you think that double standard is worse than, say, Trump's mean tweet about Napoleon?
Yeah, and that's the question that I was talking about earlier. To boil down my criticism of Republican corruption just to the Napoleon tweet, when I also cited something that was more than just a tweet, more than just words, the removing of government grants from people working with law firms, that's so much worse. But Rob doesn't touch that at all. I mean, I said it pretty clearly. Rob doesn't touch it at all, because he does it again. Like, if you ask the question, okay, what was worse, this double standard and not charging this person, or removing law firms' ability to work, or removing people's willingness to work with a particular law firm who sided against me by threatening to withhold government grants from them? What do you think is worse? I would arguably say that probably the law firm thing is worse, like actually trying to tank Perkins Coie on the grounds that they sided in cases against the Trump administration, and now we're going to be removing government grants from these people who work with Perkins Coie. That's insane. Are there any MAGA Republicans that argue in good faith? I don't know. The problem is that I don't know if Rob I would necessarily call bad faith as much as I would just call him like an actual debate bro. Like everything that people levy against Destiny or other of the debate bro archetypes, I think Rob fits super well. Andrew Wilson fits the Phil Bro side a little better too, but I don't know if I'd necessarily call Rob bad faith. I'm trying to think of like people on the right that I think are good faith. I think Ben Shapiro is relatively good faith. I think that he's going to play cover for Trump a lot, but I think he's relatively good faith. But the problem is a lot of MAGA Republicans, I actually don't know. The problem is that a lot of the Republicans that I would say argue in good faith are probably going to be viewed as rhinos now, because if you're a MAGA Republican, it probably means that you're not going to be willing to break with Trump on literally anything ever. They can both be bad, and we could tackle both. Why should we ignore Trump's corruption? I don't think he's necessarily saying we should ignore Trump's corruption, but he's saying that we should completely disregard anybody calling out Trump's corruption unless they spent the entire 4 years also calling out individualized corruption within Biden's campaign. Which I think there's some merit to that argument, but the problem is that he's applying that to people and media. I think that would be way more apt to just apply to media, like, hey, CNN, where were you for the last 4 years? I think that's a fine argument, instead of saying like, oh, well, unless you particularly called out the arresting of Bannon and Navarro for violating a subpoena, I have a tweet from when that happened, you calling it out, that I'm never going to listen to anything you have to say about Trump. It's like, okay, okay, buddy. There's a little bit of merit, but yeah, again, like, just from utility, you would think that fighting corruption is fighting corruption. That's probably going to be a good thing if you reduce corruption, because you can fight just as hard to fight that corruption whenever the Democrats in office, which I know for a fact Rob did. That's politics. Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Seems like he wants to deprioritize Republican corruption until we get rid of Democrat corruption. That's basic, kind of, yeah, basically. In practice, that's definitely what it is, because the people that would meet Rob's like super like narrowly defined purity test for who can call out corruption is going to be like nobody.
Okay, so you're starting to see my point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if I forgive you and say, well, you just didn't focus on any of this is because you're young. The people in the Democratic Party, the media, etc., that want to hyper-focus on things like this, that had no problem with the fact that the FBI went after Trump like a rabid dog for things like obstruction of justice and literally let Hillary Clinton's team off the hook for something that was far more blatant, to even to the point where you admit, yeah, that's a double standard. The FBI should have charged him. Can you start to see why I don't take those people seriously when they talk of issues of corruption?
Kind of, but I think also the problem is, like, if we have an interest in fighting corruption instead of fighting for... I let him walk off of that too hard, and it's because I was tired. Like, I had been sitting on this panel for like a fucking hour at this point, and it was already, I think, 1:30 EST, so I was tired. But I should have let him stick, like, well, no, we're not just calling out Trump's mean tweets here. Like, that's not all we're doing. I'm not saying, like, what's worse, the FBI involvement or the mean tweets. I'm talking about, like, genuine, actionable corruption, and I bring this up later. Genuine, actionable corruption from Republicans, or genuine, actionable corruption from Democrats, like the like the stuff that happened with J6 or the law firm stuff. Like, those are super clear pieces of corruption that we're kind of looking past, even though these are the people with political power right now, in favor of purity testing to only fight against it with people that that called out super niche pieces of corruption in 2016. It feels almost like the purity testing from the lefties, where it's like, unless you call out every single piece of colonial action from Western countries, I'm never going to ally with you and work towards good solutions. It almost feels like that kind of purity testing. For our political party, we would probably be like standing hand in hand with those people anyway to try and fight against real corruption that exists within the executive branch.
I do stand in hand to hand with the people that are legitimately trying to fight corruption. I do not stand hand in hand with the people that are selectively only going after Donald Trump because he's seen as a political outsider, and the FBI, which is far more powerful and dangerous than Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden or Barack Obama. That's an institution that could do far more in putting their thumb on the scale of our elections and interfering than anything Russia could ever do. And yet our entire country stopped for 3 years while we investigated Russia collusion, so it was so serious. But now I got to listen to the same Democratic media people that cheered on the Russia collusion hoax, that cheered on going after Trump for obstruction of justice for classified documents, who's sitting there knowingly that Hillary Clinton's team deleted subpoenaed evidence and the FBI left him off the hook. I do not stand hand in hand with those people, because those people aren't interested in fighting corruption, as the evidence shows. Those people are interested in Orange Man bad and holding a double standard so that they can take down the Orange Man. Fuck those people. I don't stand hand in hand. I mock and ridicule them and call them out for the corrupt bastards that they are.
If it does result in less corruption to stand hand in hand with those people, even if they are bad faith in pushing against real corruption from Donald Trump, don't you think that would be a good thing?
No, because it won't, right? one, even if it would, it wouldn't, because if we have unequal application of the law in this country, and this is an argument people try to make to me all the time, right? Okay, you're right. The FBI was fucked up. They never charged people for FARA violations until it was Trump's campaign manager, Paul Manafort. But now they...
Maybe I've just felt that Republicans are extremely picky about what facts they choose to believe, but maybe it's because I'm Danish and you have a different base beliefs. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I mean you are right. I mean, like they are definitely, like, most lies by Republicans are not like lies necessarily. A lot of them are not lies necessarily, more so like lies by omission. But yeah.
They should start charging people. Oh, okay, cool. We have blatant evidence that Hunter Biden violated FARA, so go after him, right? Well, the FBI didn't. You'll be like, well, but still, isn't it better to go after one corrupt? No, because what it results is unequal application of the law, and the corrupt get more entrenched because all it means is they're...
Well, the problem is, too, is that it all comes back to the framing of corruption as this partisan issue. Corruption is not a partisan issue. It's a whoever's in power issue. To act like there's been no criminal prosecution of Democrats for corruption when Eric Adams got indicted, when somebody before me pointed out a couple people that ended up getting excised from the party, and then, you know, it's the same thing with, like, if there's a conspiracy, every time that there's something that contradicts, it's because they had no choice or else it would unveil the conspiracy. So it was one of those, but, like, to act like corruption is a partisan issue is just not on either side. I mean, for lefties to act like Republicans are necessarily like corrupt and the Democratic Party are just angels is really stupid, and vice versa, to act like you know, the Republicans are angels and Democrats are just trying to weaponize against Trump. It's just not how it works. It's and if you're going, the unequal application of the law relies on the idea that Democrats never get convicted for corruption or investigated for corruption, and it's just not true. There were multiple investigations of Hillary Clinton. Even if you don't like the way that ended up playing out, there were multiple investigations of Donald Trump that also ended up not resulting in criminal punishment that absolutely should have. There was you know, Eric Adams. There was like all of these fucking things. To act like there's a super unequal application of the law is just not true. It's just not true. And Rob can make his case seem really strong when he's talking about double standards, but whenever, you know, 5 of the 9 cases that he brings up end up falling through because they're like super actual clear cases of corruption that were rightfully investigated. Like, there's a reason he walked off of the law firms. There's a reason he ended up walking off of the disbarment. There's a reason he ends up walking off of the J6 indictment. Even the classified documents thing is different because Donald Trump was literally saying, hey, I didn't declassify this, so I shouldn't be showing it to you, but here it is. Like, that's super in nature different than anything else that we've seen on the Democrat side. So these are not the same.
They're allowed to be corrupt with impunity, and anyone that's considered an outsider to them they'll say, show me the person and I'll show you the crime. So no.
And also, like, it'd be different if these cases of corruption were just not being investigated, but they were. Like, there was a whole House inquiry, an impeachment inquiry into Joe Biden for Burisma, and it didn't result in anything. That there was all of the political incentive for that to find something too, and it didn't go anywhere. They didn't even move to impeach him. I mean, Hunter Biden did end up being got for the gun form violations. He did end up getting pardoned, but that's within presidential power. I think it was bad. I think that was a bad pardon, but I mean, still, that's not like a non-adherence to rule of law. If January 6th was an insurrection, why was nobody convicted of insurrection related to their involvement in January 6th? So I know you're not actually interested in a good faith reply to this question, but I'm going to give it anyway because I feel good in my heart today, okay? Insurrection as a criminal charge has very, very little case law behind it. So whenever a prosecutor is going for a charge, they're probably going to go with something that has a little more case law behind it, so they know how the statute is applied. So that's why instead of going for insurrection charges, Jack Smith went for conspiracy to disrupt an official proceeding. A lot of the local prosecutors went with seditious conspiracy, or like obstruction with violence. Like that, there are more tailored charges with more case law behind it that these people wanted to go with. So even if this event like meets the colloquial understanding of what an insurrection is, there's reasons not to pursue an insurrection charge because there's just not a lot of case law behind it. And it's my understanding that I don't think we charged anybody with insurrection as like a criminal charge. Has anybody been charged with it? I don't think so. I mean, maybe, but I don't think so.
It's absolutely against the very tenets of what our legal system should be, which is equal application of the law. If the people that are enforcing the law are intentionally allowing corruption to occur from one side and intentionally looking under every single nook and cranny to go after corruption in the other side. No, it's not better that, well, at least they got corruption on that other side.
Yeah, it's just relying on the idea that corruption is a partisan thing that the Democrats partake in, and that Democrats never get charged with any corruption, and Republicans, whenever Democrats investigate corruption, it's like weaponization of the government. This is not how it works. I mean, maybe your logic is okay if we apply to some, but certainly not all. If it was in fact an insurrection, the motivations of the particular, in the case of very little case law behind it, yeah, I don't think that's strange at all. Like, all of the prosecutors are probably going to be thinking about the same thing in that regard. That there's very little case law behind the term insurrection. So why would we try and go for a charge that we might not get because the statute is super ill-defined when we could go for a way safer charge of seditious conspiracy that probably results in similar levels of criminal punishment? That makes way more sense. The Confederates got charged with insurrection, I think. I actually don't believe that's true. I read somewhere that that's not true. I actually haven't fact-checked that claim specifically, but I don't think that that's true. I'll be right back. So even by your own logic, calling it an insurrection would be hyperbole. I typically, no, I wouldn't say it's hyperbole because I think that January 6th absolutely falls within the colloquial understanding of what an insurrection is. But I can understand why the prosecutors didn't want to go for insurrection as a criminal charge. But calling it an insurrection when most people just define insurrection as like a group of people trying to prevent like a constitutional, what is it, a function of the Constitution, or like a violent uprising against the government or something like that. Like January 6th absolutely satisfies the colloquial understanding of insurrection. Absolutely.
And that's even when you further then look at, even that's accepting that it is actual corruption they're going after Trump's team. Most of the time, like with the Russia collusion shit, it wasn't corruption. It was bullshit. And they manufactured it all knowing that it was bullshit and coming from Hillary Clinton's team, and they hid that truth from everyone. No, I don't trust those people now when they say, trust me, bro, this time it is. You can't
even see it as hyperbole in the slightest? No, I wouldn't call somebody saying that January 6th is an insurrection hyperbolic. I would probably say colloquially that it is an insurrection. Yeah, sure. But I don't know if I was a prosecutor, I probably wouldn't go after insurrection charges, like as a criminal charge. Check, not even Robert E. Lee got charged with it, even though he was by the book a traitor. Yeah. Despite the fact that it was non-stop beat into your minds, nobody being charged and convicted of it, your logic doesn't stand up. I already explained that the criminal charge doesn't even... The criminal charge of insurrection doesn't interface with the colloquial understanding of insurrection. And now Andrea has even made it like that's a good point. I mean, like, even the people who are super clearly understood as insurrectionists, the people who seceded from the Union within the Civil War, not even they were charged with insurrection. So, but like, if we're just going based off of anyone who's charged with insurrection as an insurrectionist, then no one's an insurrectionist, and there was never an insurrection ever. So good. if we want to go by that definition, that's fine. You would still have to argue that like engaging in seditious conspiracy instead of insurrection was a good thing, because people were charged with seditious conspiracy. If you have a conspiracy to secede, that's probably just as bad.
Legit corruption.
Could we agree that at least in the case...
We've got a new voter here, right?
Huh?
A brand new voter. He's asking what to vote for.
This diversion was so fucking stupid. I don't know when it stopped.
On your local...
That was a populist on the left or the right, doesn't matter for the sake of this, right? Everyone had a good school board election. Shifts, like, just
and you get
a weird...
I did.
You know,
well, everybody shows up.
How much for sometimes age absent? Before I hand it back to you, I just want to say I am going to go check on my daughter real quick.
So all the courts decided not to follow up on actually charging anybody with it and just charge them with minor offenses. No, seditious conspiracy is absolutely not a minor offense. It's probably going to be a very criminally apt offense. Like, that's going to be very similar to an insurrection charge. Seditious conspiracy isn't something that you can just hit anybody with at any time. That's insane. And then the courts aren't responsible for charging people. It's going to be your prosecutors.
Good. I like you.
The panel's been fairly mild tonight, so I'm not like
with unfairly applied laws. Obviously, I'm going to agree with that. I would say that this also seems to transcend party, though. I mean, like, surrounding a lot of the stuff with the 2020 election, I think we saw like very, very clear evidence of very similar weaponization happening. When it came to like trying to pressure the attorney general to send letters, asking the state legislators to lie about their election results, you know, things of that nature, tells me almost the same exact thing. Or you know, like trying to pressure the vice president to do what they were asking him to do. I feel like this institutional corruption, I agree that it's a good thing to I shouldn't have phrased it as asking the vice president to do what they were asking him to do. I should have been way more pointed, where I was like, yeah, they're asking vice president to decide the results of the election. Like, that's absolutely corrupt. Come on. Point out, but I think just focusing on, well, I'm going to focus on, you know, whatever happened. Also, Ian, just to let you know, buddy. Give me 1 second. For easy recourse here, we can come chat about it. I know that you like to run because you know that you couldn't stand up to a debate, but I mean, we can have a talk. We can have a chat about it. I'm fine with chatting about this. But I'm not going to go hand in hand with the same people that only see half of it. I think that that's going to be not an effective way to address corruption.
I disagree. I think, in fact, what you could see is the more we've shirked people, presumably like you, that want to have a selective way of just saying, trust me, anyone from outside the system, we focus on their corruption while we ignore our corruption, that we've started to see better...
I don't know why he said presumably like you, and I already conceded that a lot of the things that he was talking about being corrupt was corrupt. Like, I don't understand why he's assuming that I'm not fine with fighting democratic corruption when I already said that I would be willing. I would be willing to concede that the Democratic Party engages in corruption as well.
And political gains. That's why we're seeing trust in the Democratic Party reach all-time lows. They're tired of the...
I already gave you several topics we can discuss. Well, it's because you want to keep starting fights about topics that you can't defend. It's that's why you get put in timeout, buddy. If you want to start a fight on something that you can't defend, then I don't know why you're here. I understand that you want to run back on every topic being just about like trans women's cocks. I understand that's the only thing you ever want to talk about, but that's I want to talk about actual things, and if you're challenging me on actual things and then you want to run away to a different topic, I just don't see a point in having you here, buddy.
Bullshit that the Democrats are saying, where it's like my democracy, as they just had an election where they intentionally subverted democracy by installing a Democratic candidate that no one got to vote for, when they're bitching about things like...
Also, absolutely, whenever people say that the Kamala Harris thing was a subverting of democracy is just ridiculous. The idea that you had the option to not vote for Kamala Harris, and everybody did. Kamala Harris didn't win the presidential election, but there was still a democratic process that went through there. The reason that people say that Trump was a threat to democracy is he tried to remove the votes entirely. He tried to decertify electors and recertify his false electors. That's like subverting democracy. That's not even remotely close to what happened with the Democrats. And framing like that does kind of push me towards like this might be bad faith, because like whenever you throw pot shots like that, especially knowing that you're going to make 5 other points, so I'm not going to be able to address that, is I hate it. I hate it so much. But out of respect to Sarah, I wasn't gonna like. Again, I'm not gonna jump down Rob's throat about shit like that because it's not my panel. It's their panel. I'm not gonna be a dick like that. We'll see somebody later who does end up being a dick like that, and he gets immediately booted too. So that's why.
Like, but what about like insurrections and shit like that? As Joe Biden himself actually made fun of Donald Trump when there was a Democrat-led insurrection on May 30th, 31st, 2020, where we saw Democrats.
And also, this is just whataboutism. This is actually. So the point that I was making here wasn't that like, oh, Donald Trump engaged in an insurrection, so he's so much worse. I'm saying that this is a real piece of corruption, even if you don't think that, even if you think that Democrats also engage in it, Donald Trump doing these things around 2020 was absolutely a piece of real corruption. So why shouldn't we have been fighting against Donald Trump, who engaged in the same kind of corruption? That's a super simple point. But he ends up walking off of it and like tying to the insurrection term because he knows that he can walk off onto different events without actually addressing these things being corrupt and that we should fight against corruption. And Donald Trump did it.
Some 60 Secret Service members as they deployed things like Molotov cocktails.
And it was a really effective diversion because this guy bites on that thing not being even remotely related to what I was talking about, and he bites on it being an insurrection. Which or like engages in the red herring events that the Democrats have engaged in that could be considered insurrections. He bites on those red herrings instead of actually letting me. I got cucked so hard on this panel instead of actually just letting me have the conversation. They had the white knight. Oh my god.
The Democratic insurrection? Hang on.
No,
what was the Democratic insurrection?
Yeah.
Hold on. I
So
love this. Holy
please,
shit. I
please.
love the Democratic insurrection. Bro, look.
Because
I'm
I
the
remember I was thinking that the whole entire time, but this dude fucking cut me off. I was cooking.
libtard, okay? I won't even go so far to say that January 6th is a actual, quote unquote insurrection.
I should have appealed to Sarah. I should have been like, hey, can I please finish my point? Because this dude, I didn't include it in the video, but the Devon guy, he cut me off super fucking hard too. For no reason. I need to I'm not super familiar with these panels. I think I've only been on like 3 of them. I was good at asserting myself with Pisco, but I felt like I was being kind of annoying about it. I need to be better at like asserting myself in these panels. It's kind of inevitable when a big panel is this big. Yeah, for sure. But I mean, like, you've just got to be more assertive. That's kind of the idea. I'm just a beta cuck who can't assert himself.
When you talk about the fucking definition. So if Jan 6 isn't an insurrection, what the fuck is the liberal fucking BLM insurrection? Please tell me. I want the details. Let's go.
Wow, the fact that you
thank you.
interrupted.
Look, I'm
so
hyper,
much,
bro.
Really,
thank you.
It really illustrates your points. I don't think that January 6th was an insurrection, nor do I think that May 30th was an insurrection. By the token that the Democrats,
thank you.
which should
As
be
long as
held
you
to
say
their,
that, I'll calm down.
By
now.
the token which the Democrats said that January 6th was an insurrection, then May 30th, 31st would also be an insurrection. My argument is that they should be held by the standards that they sought to employ to other people. On May 30th, going into May 31st, 2020, what happened was we saw a bunch of Black Lives Matter Antifa type people attack.
Okay, we're just gonna skip past to my part because all of this, by the way, is completely and utterly irrelevant to the actual topic that I'm trying to get at. Like, regardless of if you want to call this an insurrection, regardless of if that's the term that you feel comfortable applying to this event, it doesn't change the fact that it's absolutely corrupt to pressure the attorney general to do that or to pressure the vice president to decertify electors. Like, that's absolutely a piece of corruption. Regardless of whether or not you want to call it an insurrection, it doesn't matter.
Shit,
But we had to have an insurrection. They not before you say bad. And yet when it was
You look
Trump
so
Democrats.
done. Well, this is like the 3rd time that I got cucked off of actually holding Rob to like a decent conversation. And I know that I watched Rob watch this back too, and he I mean, like, it seemed like he kind of shared my frustration where God, I kept getting cut off by people who didn't like who didn't know what I was saying to try and white knight for me, and it pissed me off super hard.
Had no problem making fun of Trump when violent lefty. The only reason that the violent lefties didn't get into the White House, the reason that I'm trying to make George Floyd that occurred, when incredibly
agree with that.
That's going to
Like,
there was that we're carrying
the even
David said
jail. Did you criticize Barack Obama, David?
Was okay.
I don't think so.
We're back.
All right, let's go back to Reynolds' point.
So the reason that I brought
Rob.
up January 6th wasn't to get on the terminology of insurrection. That's not what I was intending to bring up. The thing that I was just trying to isolate is that we see inappropriate or corrupt interactions between Trump and his cabinet officials to do like objectively inappropriate things to try and use the DOJ to pressure the states to change their election results. That is, I would hope that we would agree that that's corrupt. I think that it was kind of telling
they didn't do that. That's not true. That's not what happened.
Okay, well that's fine, but we could have that conversation.
Where did that happen? Georgia?
Georgia. I think it was involved in the Georgia indictment, but I'm pretty sure that we have the letter that Clark was trying to pressure Rosen and Donahue to send to the state legislators. And the state legislators, I think, was the 7 targeted states. I know for a fact that it happened in Georgia, but I'm also pretty sure that it happened in the other states as well. I think it happened in all 7 of the targeted states. Something that I didn't bring up here, which would have absolutely just ended the conversation, is that not only were they sending the letters to pressure these people, but also they were literally calling the governors to hold special sessions of the legislature to certify Donald Trump's electors as well. So this wasn't just the letter to decertify. It was also the conversations with the governors and the heads of the legislators to certify the fraudulent electors. So it was actually pressuring them to fraudulently change their election results. Just that I forgot I didn't bring up the second part.
The election results. It seems to me, I think what was happening was...
Yes, it was to decertify their election results.
Correct.
Right.
And what was the goal? The goal was to have a separate slate of electors.
Here I cooked, though. Thank God. Anytime that anybody wants to challenge me on the electors, I think I might be... Me, Destiny, Pisco, might be... I don't know. Maybe... Coy's pretty good. It's gonna be I know most of the shit that anybody will ever bring up about the electors argument. So, how often do you do these debate reviews? I'm really liking this style of content. Whenever I either absolutely fry somebody or I feel like I didn't perform as well as I want to, I'm probably gonna do a debate review. Now that's only happened 2 or 3 times. I think I've only done 2 debate reviews, but yeah. I mean, whenever I feel like I didn't make all of the points that I wanted to make in a debate, I'm probably going to do a review like this.
So that there could be a challenge, just like in the 1960 JFK Nixon election that we saw in Hawaii.
One of them was approved by
Rob,
Congress,
you don't
bro.
believe
That doesn't
that.
it doesn't matter.
Yes, I certainly do believe that. And if you want to get in depth into the 60 alternate slate of electors,
in 1960, no one ever pressured the vice president to make the unilateral decision. Don't Republicans usually just slither around this topic? It depends. So they'll either slither around it, they'll feign ignorance, or they'll bring up 1960. If you bring up 1960, you're probably just not super aware of the situation. Which I'm like, if somebody brings up 1960, I know it's probably going to be at least an okay conversation because that's a decent talking point. It's wrong, but it's decent. The feigning ignorance is just like, okay, well then I'll just go through this whole plot with you and we'll go step by step. That's fine. Or the slither around it, which is like the bad faith way of engaging with it. But I don't know if Rob is engaging in bad faith. I think he just well, I actually don't know because we'll just let it go. To choose the elector.
It doesn't matter. There's nothing illegal about. There's nothing illegal.
Okay, thank you. Okay. The difference between 1960 and 2020 is that there was never any plot for the vice president to break the Electoral Count Act to unilaterally certify electors. That's never happened in American history outside of 2020. And that was like the bad thing. The bad thing is that they were asking the vice president to choose the winner of the election. That obviously matters. And it obviously matters to the corruption point too. Like, even if you want to say like, oh, well, no, we're just talking about like it as it pertains to corruption, then you asking the vice president to choose the winner of the election is absolutely corrupt. Like, I can't think of something more corrupt than putting the election in the hands of somebody who has direct political ties to the winner of the election. Like, that's the definition of corruption, and that's super relevant. Now he's going to say, like, oh, okay, well, you're either claiming that the electors are illegal or not illegal. 1960 was legal. The thing that was illegal that the Trump campaign was doing was swapping out electors, aka like the potential electors that the RNC chose. They, in some cases, swapped out different electors for those people. That was illegal. And trying to pressure the vice president to break the Electoral Count Act. That's the part that was illegal. So to say that doesn't matter to the legality or the corruption of the act is insane. That's insane.
There's nothing illegal about what the vice president or pressuring the vice president that they should have some sort of elector challenge. There's nothing illegal about that. Now,
that is legal. That is illegal. Pressuring the vice president to bypass congressional debate is illegal. It's against the Electoral Count Act. Eastman conceded it was illegal. Eastman said that if it was challenged to the Supreme Court, they would say it was illegal. Every constitutional scholar agrees that it was illegal. I'm pretty sure even before it was proposed to Trump, Eastman literally directly commented and said that Article or Amendment 22 doesn't give the vice president just unilateral authority over the counting of the electors. It's just not. I feel like fighting is always going to fuck and what? I feel like fighting is always going to fuck unless they just bravado through and hope the listeners haven't turned their brains off. Yeah. There's no good defense of this. 1960 is the best defense, but it still falls flat. And you either have to bravado through it or just not engage with it to look good.
That I criticize Trump's decision to do it, but it doesn't rise to the level of illegality or anything like trying to have a coup that we're trying to hear. If you go back to the Nixon JFK Hawaii circumstance, the argument that we're told is the alternate slate of electors themselves are what would be illegal. And the reason is because
that's not the story. No one's ever said that 1960 was illegal. No one's ever said that. No one's ever said 1960 was illegal. I don't know who told you 1960 was illegal, but no one's ever going to say that simply submitting alternate electors is illegal. That's prescribed for in the Electoral Count Act. It's allowed. That's explicitly allowed. The problem was the plot with the vice president.
Only the governor has the right to certify the slate of electors, right, Non-Fun?
Also, I don't know why he refocused the non-font here.
Sure.
Okay. Well, did you know that in the Nixon election, actually, the governor did certify a slate of electors, and it was the Republican slate, and yet still the Democrats sent an uncertified slate of electors to the White House. Now, Renaud, do you know why they did that?
Yes, because there was an ongoing. That's also not true. The state executive, I'm pretty sure, gave his blessing on both slates and said that this slate would be certified in case of this recount coming out in the Democrats' favor, which it did end up doing. That was legal. Recount in, I believe, Hawaii that may change the result of the election. Yeah.
That's correct. And so the problem was that there is legislatively rules that say there are certain timeframes that you have to meet. And the fear was once the vice president certified the slate of electors, even if after that point the recount actually showed that it was the wrong slate of electors, it would be too late, correct?
The problem is that that's not permitted in the Electoral Count Act. You don't get a delay past January 6th via the Electoral Count Act, and asking the vice president to make that unilateral decision instead of pass it off to Congress would be against that federal law.
It doesn't matter. By sending those alternate slate of electors...
Thank you. That was an apt face. It does matter. Breaking the federal law to instate yourself as the president super does matter. And he's claiming that somehow it's against the Electoral Count Act to submit alternate electors at all. That's not illegal.
It's a delaying tactic anyways. It's the same thing. The only difference you have is Trump said, yeah, you should accept this delaying tactic. If the delaying tactic's illegal, then it was illegal when Democrats...
Yeah, see, I don't even know what the fuck he's talking about here, because delaying tactics... submitting alternate electors is not a delaying tactic. It's still going to be certified regardless on January 6th. It doesn't matter if you submit an alternate elector. It's still going to be submitted by December 15th, and it's still going to be certified on January 6th.
Do it as well.
No, because they
Does
weren't
it
trying to
matter
use the
if-
vice president to bypass congressional debate. But
Yeah, does it
When
matter
was the
if
congressional
memo-
debate?
Hold on.
I mean,
Does it-
again,
I accidentally, I don't think I heard him at the time. I think I slid past the idea that he thinks that submitting the alternate electors at all was illegal. That's just not true. That's just not how the electors work. It's just not.
Since I'm saying I don't particularly like this strategy, I thought that it was slimy. The idea, like a lot of the other shit with this, was
Also, what's the difference between I think it's slimy and I think it's corrupt? Is it just because like the like slimy sounds better? Like if something is slimy, it's typically going to be because it's corrupt. That's the idea. Was it
okay to have
corrupt?
legal challenges. Democrats do it all
Good
the
question.
time.
Was it
Okay,
corrupt?
all right.
But doesn't
I
matter.
don't
Go ahead,
personally
Will.
like
Even-
conspiracies, but can you pull up from a president that majority of
And this
Americans
dude,
don't
oh
think?
my god, this dude kept fucking killing me. Because he's just throwing in the most fucking soy rage lib talking points about January 6th when we're talking about legality and corruption. We're not talking about all of the events at the Capitol riot. That's not what we're talking about.
He was elected by the fucking mob. Can you pull up an example from, I don't know, past 1985? Something that has like votes.
Yeah, and to act like precedents from 1960 isn't a good thing to bring up. It's a good thing to bring up the 1960 election. Just because you don't know how to engage with it, that doesn't mean that you should cut off the person who was engaging with it. Oh my god.
Machines involved with it. Do we always have to go all the way the fuck back to the 1960s
No,
for
it
you to
doesn't matter.
actually argue your
Yeah,
point?
1960
let me answer your question.
1960
2018, a YouGov poll showed that 66%.
Okay,
we're so pissed off.
Please
Thank
be
you.
quiet. Please be quiet. You asked the question, I'll answer. A YouGov
Okay,
poll
yes.
in 2018 showed that 66% of Democrats.
I feel like Rob knows this stuff by now, given how many times he's had this debate. I actually don't know how much he's debated January 6th. I know he talked about it with Destiny. I don't remember how that ended up turning out. I mean, maybe. I don't like jumping to bad faith. Unless I like know for a fact he knows this stuff. But I don't know.
Democrats believed that Russia interfered and actually messed with voting machine tallies to steal the election from Hillary Clinton. That's because we saw Democrats that were beating that home, including Hillary Clinton herself, that has said multiple times and continues to say that the election was stolen from her because Russia
And if we
interfered.
did a poll and asked Americans, was the 2020 election rigged? If we asked Republicans, what would they say?
It doesn't
Maybe
matter.
70%. And your point?
Okay,
If it's
so
contemptible,
to
if
me
it's
that sounds like a
contemptible-
lot of Americans are fucking stupid.
Wow,
I'm just going to be
maybe,
honest.
Maybe that's true. And yet we only focus on when the Republicans do it.
I'm not
Well,
focusing.
Meanwhile, we're talking about when the Republicans are doing it, and you're moving off of when the Republicans are doing it to just focus on when the Democrats did it. Oh my god. Okay.
On
Serious
either
question
side. No,
about the-
I think it's dumb
Okay.
when Democrats focus on Russiagate, and I think it's dumb when Republicans focus on 2020 election.
Okay.
Both
I'm-
of these things can be true at the
You
same
never-
time.
I'm arguing against the 2020 election focus.
I'm gonna-
Or the
I'm gonna
January
dip out.
6th shit.
I'm gonna
That's
dip
what
out.
I'm
Can I
doing.
say one more thing real quick,
Rob,
and then I'll
sure.
leave?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I needed to leave because I was so tired of getting cut off every fucking time that I needed to hold Rob to an answer, and I got cut off every fucking time. I had to leave. There was no shot. I would like to have another conversation with Rob about this maybe, but oh my god.
No.
I want to say it was kind of telling that our bar for success in fighting corruption was unpopularity within the Democratic Party. I think that was a little true. That was a little bit ago. Yeah, he said like, yeah, we're being successful in fighting corruption because look at the approval ratings of the Democratic Party. It's like that's our bar for fighting corruption is how unpopular the Democrats are. Doesn't that like kind of unveil your partisanship? Like your standard for fighting corruption is making the Democrats unpopular. And to do so, you're getting behind another equally corrupt party to do it. Like, how is this fighting corruption? You're just you're not draining the swamp. You're replacing the swamp with your swamp. That's all this politics. That's all this kind of politics is doing. Telling. I don't know if that's actually fighting. I don't know if that's actually fighting corruption as much as, like I said, probably just going for partisanship. I think we should be focusing on fighting corruption. Regardless, maybe my brain is just not willing to accept that Rob might be a little stupid. I don't think you're stupid necessarily if you bring up the 1960 thing, because I think that is like a satisfying sounding talking point. it's not so much stupid as it is uninformed. But I'd have to talk to Rob about it more, like see more of his engagement on the elector stuff to know whether or not he's bad faith on this topic. Regardless of party systems.
I don't know, but can I ask you to clarify? I literally don't know what you're saying when you said about unpopularity of the Democratic Party.
When I asked if you think it's an effective way to fight corruption, to not hold hands with the people who are actually interested in fighting this kind of corruption as well, the thing that you cited in being successful was the unpopularity of the Democratic Party.
Let me ask you a question before you leave, right? And I'll explain that point, right? If a local police force sat there and watched speeding, and they only ever pulled over black people. Now, the black people they pulled over were literally speeding, but you sit there and watch them and you watch white person after white person after white person speed. Would your argument be, but nonetheless, we must arrest those black people because we have to stop the crime, and it would still be better to stop some crime than all crime? Would that be your argument?
So obviously that's not going to be my argument, but it's a bad analogy. To say, like, obviously I'm not going to be supporting just going after Republican corruption. And I'm not saying that you should be supportive of that either. But what I am saying is that we shouldn't just be, in this scenario, we shouldn't just be fighting against only charging the black people by aligning ourselves with a group that's only going to charge the white people here, because they're just doing this one thing and then ignore the party that you're aligning with doing the same exact thing.
I don't believe that
he said that's not true. Republicans aren't corrupt. Is that what we're saying? There's no corruption in the Republican Party, or that there's not like similar levels of corruption in the Republican Party. Is that seriously what we're saying? That's why I say it's like hyper partisan. Is because like anybody saying that is obviously like, come on.
It's worth having singled out only one side, just like the American people majoritarily
So
would be
they're backing Donald
disgusted
Trump?
if we said we're just going after criminals, they happen to all be black. They would say, no, fuck that. Then stop arresting the black criminals if that means that you're going to selectively go after only them. That's what the American people would say. That's why the Democratic Party is unpopular. They're not buying this bullshit that everything Donald Trump is a crime, it's corrupt, but we could overlook all the shit that Democrats did. They don't buy it. That's why I bring up that their popularity is at record lows. Why don't you run on policy instead of lawfare?
Yeah, why don't you run on policy? Votes for Trump. Okay. Yeah, he's also assuming like Democrats get away with corruption, but Republicans don't. When Republicans are far more corrupt, do more crime, get caught way less for it. Yeah. I mean, to act like Democrats always get away with corruption and Republicans never get away with corruption is just not how it works. It's just not true. But that was the debate with Rob. I'm not blaming Sarah for this, but boy, oh boy, was the format just really fucking terrible for that kind of debate. But I'm not blaming Sarah. I'm blaming the people who kept fucking cutting me off because of it. Holy God.